Welcome everyone to a little BDE video. We wanted to get something out about the announcement today since we recorded yesterday and unfortunately missed the announcement for that episode. But there is just too much to talk about here to wait until next week for this. Has everyone read the announcement?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Sean, I think, is just getting kind of caught up now, but we got a banned and restricted announcement from the man himself, Mr. James White, and oh boy, does this shake up the meta. I just want to run through the banned cards real quick. So, as of September 9th, the following cards are banned in both Classic Constructed and Blitz. The cards are Art of War, Bonds of Ancestry, Cash In, Orahan of Mystic Tenets, Tome of Aetherwind, Tome of Divinity, Tome of Findel, and Tome of Firebrand. And Bonds of Ancestry is now restricted in Living Legend on top of that. Holy shit, boys.
Yeah, so I think we have officially entered. I know Ty and I talked about this very, very, very briefly. Fab 3.0. I feel like we're 5 years into the game. We've done the Fab 2.0, but there were cards that existed in early Fab, Art of War being the big one that I'm going to talk about here, that served a role, but as the game grew, as card pools got deeper, there were more ways to abuse it. We saw it with Tigers, Phoenix Flames, Fi could get away with some shenanigans that way. Just it got to the point where the card has no longer it's outlived its service and its purpose in the game, and it's now time to just send it off, and they can go live in Living Legend, which is where these cards can live, which I think is a super interesting thing. But with that too is it's we have a completely different meta. The way we're building decks is going to be differently. Prism is going to be a completely different deck. When you take tomes out of Prism, Vestige comes out of the deck, so you're not doing these weird combo things. So there's going to be a lot of unique things that come out with Rosetta when everything happens September 9th, and then Rosetta's released on the 20th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think they kind of, specifically regarding Art of War, they kind of call that out in their announcement. The fact that it was a generic is kind of what pushed it over, right? There was no downside really to any aggro deck, just putting it in there and going, okay, yeah, I just get to, filter my hand, buff my attack power, and we're off to the races. Like, I'm surprised, but I'm also not at the same time. I didn't think, honestly, that they would have the balls to do it,
They
but
proved you wrong.
they really did. But I think, yeah, like you were saying, Zach, I mean, it's time. It's outlived its purpose in today's Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
And I just want to, any listeners here that haven't actually gone and read James White's announcement and reasoning why all the tomes in Art of War have been hit, I encourage you to please go read it, because at first when I heard the cards that were banned, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And then I went and I read his reasoning and what the impact the cards were actually having on the game and how they were diverging with their initial goal for Flesh and Blood, right? They want Flesh and Blood to be this game where at the end of the game, you have been rewarded for the good decisions you've made throughout the game. And cards like Art of War, cards like Tome of Fandal, cards like Tome of Aetherwind, historically have been at the end game. If you play any of these three cards, you are setting yourself up to be in a much better position, even if you have made some bad decisions early on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really trying to narrow that focus down to each card matters, each decision should be impactful, and they don't want these decks just to be able to abuse cards that when initially printed were strong, but they didn't have a lot going for them. But now there's just too many ways to abuse those cards. The one that hurts me the most is Toma Fandal. That's been one of my favorite cards ever since I started playing this game. From first playing it in Dash and Datadol to finally playing it in my Rhinar deck, Toma has been like just a staple for me. And I get the reasoning why they banned it. Because a one cost draw two, if you play it from Arsenal, gain life equal to the cards in your hand. With Mechanologist now, with all these crank items, getting action points is just way too easy. So if you're able to set that in Arsenal, you just play something, play your cranked item, get the action point back, and then you play your tome. Oftentimes just running a Tekla Foundry Heart before it so that you net positive on resource for playing it. It's just, I really agree. And the rest of the tomes that got hit, including Firebrand, including Duplicity, they all have these same reasonings going for them. So take the time to go read them if a deck that you play is suffering from these bans, because there is good reasoning for it.
Yeah, I think reading the article, like their reasoning behind all of the bans is very solid. And it gives us a nice picture of like the direction that they want to take Fab going into like 2025 post Rosetta.
Yeah, the direction they want to take it is they want to make Riptide and Teklo the top deck, obviously. Because Riptide and Teklo got huge boosts with this ban.
Let's go Riptide!
Yeah, I think like specifically with Tome, you know, when it was released, there just wasn't like outside of Rhinar and like Scab Skins, there just wasn't as many heroes that could abuse action points or like get around playing it as like the only action in a turn or like at the end of a turn. I mean, we didn't have wizards when it was printed. We didn't have mechanologists that just say, yeah, I'm going to generate like 7 million action points in a turn and shoot you with a pistol and also draw like 4 cards. And I mean, obviously, like we've seen what these tomes can do in Kano, and they mention him in both the Tome of Findel and the Tome of Aether when banned. I mean, he just goes, lol, I'm going to play him at instant speed anyways.
Yeah, drawing cards at instant speed is really strong, which is the same reasoning behind Tome of Divinity. If you've played Prism a lot, or if you've played into Prism a lot, you have seen the game plan of you get a card into Soul, you pitch a blue to play a tome, you draw 3 cards, you have maybe a Soraya on board, you attack with that, you draw 2 more cards, you draw into another tome, so let's draw some more cards, and then you just overwhelm the state just because you just drew cards. You didn't innately do anything that was like playing the game and doing the methodical thing of like getting the good value, kind of like you were saying earlier, Bailey and Cliff, about this idea of like we want you to get to the end game state and be like, I got rewarded for my good decisions. I got rewarded for holding back and taking a lot of damage, so I could then threaten and get to like that end game state a little bit faster. It's when we see these cards that can kind of like accelerate that, and there's not a lot of things that your opponent can do to interact with that. I think Mechanologist with Tome of Fendal, that's like drawing a bunch of cards, creating a bunch of action points, gaining health, and then swinging for more damage is like, hey, that's a really strong thing, really powerful thing to do. But like also if you're relying on that as your win con, then well, that's not a very fun thing to do, and that's kind of like the antithesis of Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood is this game where it's like you got multiple ways to win. You don't have to worry about like setting up land to be able to do a big thing. You draw your opening hand. You're like, hey, I got 2 blues. I can do X, Y, Z, and like you make your own story. You make your own legend, which I think like the beauty of playing like a hero centric game like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think at least in my opinion, like their intention here is to kind of like reduce the amount of non-games, right? And I think they specifically call it out in the Tome of Divinity reasoning. Um, where like the game like might go on for a few turns beyond this, but it effectively ended at that point, right? Where you put that player down into a state where they can't recover, not through like skill, but simply because you were able to draw a bunch
Do
of
your
cards and either establish like an unbreakable board state or threaten way more damage than you would have otherwise been able to So I think there's like a skill argument to factor into it, and I think they just want to see more of that like skilled gameplay rather than luck based.
I
Yeah.
do think it is worth mentioning that there are some ripple effects that we are going to see from these bans. Cards that have been added into decks, such as Hold the Line, Balance of Justice, are probably not going to see as much play anymore, except into maybe KO, because KO still gets his Blood Rush Bellows.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the reasoning they kept Blood Rush Bellow is it's a class specific, and you still have to discard that card from hand. So that one does have a little bit more cost initiative in it than say Art of War or any of the tomes.
Well, it's got the same kind of cost as Art of War.
However,
You're not like
how
going up on card advantage necessarily, but it's the fact that you're able to like filter out certain cards and like buff your power on top of that in most cases. Um, but the fact that it's class specific is
the big
kind of their reasoning
the
for
big
keeping it in. And if you read to the end, they kind of give their reasoning for keeping in other card draw, that not spells, but like card draw cards, things like Three of a Kind, Tome of Harvest. Those have, in their words, like natural limitations built into the card to prevent multiple copies from being played in a turn. I think like Rangers, especially Lexi, can still definitely get off like double Three of a Kind turns if you have one in Arsenal, but it's harder for them to capitalize on that. You still have like your limitations with things like Voltaire and how many cards you'd be able to like load and stuff like that, where you might not necessarily be able to do as much with those cards you just drew. And then Tome of Harvest, you have to have a card
cards
in
in
your
it.
arsenal to play it, and you're not able to access your arsenal after playing it. So I think leaving those alone for now was a smart move. I guess only time will tell um, if those could go on the chopping block, later on in the future. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes of this meta.
Yeah,
For
I
the
mean, like,
next meta, oh, go Zach.
yeah, I'm just saying, like, when we speak of meta, like, the next meta is like it's completely unknown. Like, we have Rosetta coming out. We know Zen gets hit, Katsu gets hit, unfortunately, with that as well. But like, Zen loses his Art of War bond stuff, but like, you can
Yeah.
still build a Tiger Zen deck that is aggressive, and it does a similar type of thing. Yeah, it's not going to be as powerful and strong, and going to be representing 25% of a top eight at nationals or something like that. But like,
Or
there are some
hitting the
unique
living
things.
legend threshold in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that was Blitz, so whatever.
That's
But
I
like,
feel like that definitely had a part in them like kicking this announcement a month ahead of schedule though.
yeah, I think, and that along with the fact that it's like, let's just reset everything for Rosetta.
Mm-hmm.
I think these bans were gonna come sooner or later. I think just like if you read through and the language they were using is just like, yeah, we're gonna like
We're
this
gonna
was
slow
this
down.
was time to sunset these cards, and that's okay. And Kano's getting upgrades in Rosetta with a bunch of new wizard cards. Like, there's a lot of things going on. Like, yeah, and that's okay. Like, I think like we're not in the. It felt like this last meta was almost like a Yu-Gi-Oh format of this, like, I'm gonna do my thing, and if you can stop me from doing my thing, then I don't win, and if you can't, then I'm gonna win, and that's not a fun gameplay experience, especially when the gameplay experience is supposed to be the back and forth. It's supposed
Mm-hmm.
to be like, hey, you block out, I attack, and like we have this give and take dance going
Exchange.
on with each other.
I think a lot of people have been kind of pining for that like heavy hitters esque meta. Like for what it's worth, like heavy hitters was a very interactive meta. As far as like blocks and attacks and the back and forth kind of that you were talking about. And I think with these bans, we'll see a little bit more of that like blocking meta comeback, which is, I mean, great for heroes like Bolton. He kind of lost a lot of legs into this no blocks meta, which was unfortunate. But I think overall these are going to be really good changes for the game. And like you and Ty were saying, I really think we are entering like the era of Fab 3.0.
And just to kind of get into the next meta, I've got a couple of predictions. With these cards being banned, every deck that ran these tomes or Art of War is going to be far more susceptible to new hand destruction. So I've got a feeling we're going to see a lot more Azuri and New just trying to pick apart hands, since now you don't have that saving grace. Okay, I lost 2 cards to this new attack. I block one. At least I can pitch to play tome, or hold up 2 cards in hand to play Art of War from Arsenal and still have the crackback. So I think New and Azuri are going to be coming really strong into the next meta. With Dash receiving the Armory deck, and from what we can tell so far, the Mechanologist cards and armor that we've seen in the next Armory deck is going to be a huge boost to most Mechanologists. So we're going to see Mechanologist resurgence back for aggro, I believe, especially since she got the new item that just draws her a card. So now instead of playing a Tome of Fandal, she can just use those extra action points to play a mech-specific pseudo-tome. I also think KO just became the dominant aggro deck again, because like we said earlier, he still has the Blood Rush Bellows, but we are going to see a resurgence of blocking decks. I think Victor and Bravo both get a buff here. Betsy, for what it's worth, probably is a little bit better, but I think she's still way out of it.
I would love to see
think
Guardians
Betsy-
break their way back in.
I think Guardian does break their way back in with Wizards and with Rune Blades coming back. I think just like the fact that we're going to have powerful Rune Blades, like I think it's just going to change the way people build decks, which is going to give Guardian space. I think like that's my prediction with that. I don't know what the top of the meta is going to be, but like Cliff, I think you bring up like those are decks to like think about. And 100% if you're like building something for early Rosetta meta, like hey, what do I want to deal with?
Yep, I still think cards like Weakest Link is still going to be really good, because if we're going to see more Brute and Mechanologist coming in top of the meta, they both run a lot of no blocks, so Weakest Link is still going to be a good card in deck if you're thinking about trying to slot stuff in. I would steer away from Hold the Line unless you're a really heavy blocking deck, but we're going to see a lot more thoughtful sideboarding tech, I think, into this next meta. There's going to be more devious plans that people are going to cook in order to try to fulfill these spots, either for a defensive option or for a different type of aggressive option. And like you said, Zach, I do think Rune Blades are going to be coming strong as well. So I think we're going from like the full ninja aggro meta back into a little bit more of the heavy hitters type, which I'm very excited for because I really enjoyed the heavy hitters meta. It felt like you could bring any deck to an event, and if you were competent on the deck, you had a chance into every matchup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, like that kind of era of Fab was just like so interactive, and you weren't. I like your Yu-Gi-Oh analogy, Zach. Like you weren't just sitting there waiting for the Zen player or the, combo player to figure out their turn and all of that. Like there was this genuine like back and forth, like you were engaging with your opponent, and it was just like overall like a great time to be playing the game.
And I do gotta ask for our resident Zen player here, even though he wasn't on the meta deck, what do you think of these bonds for your Tiger Zen, Sean?
So these bonds, as you call them, Cliff, instead of bands,
No,
are
like Bonds of Ancestry.
the bonds of ancestry being gone.
Well, not only that, but also losing Art of War, especially for your Tiger deck.
Yeah. So I played both Art of War and the Mystic Tenantry card, and I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty big hit. But after reading this for the first time, I'm looking through it. These are definitely cards they should have hit. Um, I'm a little disappointed to say, but I feel like even though they got banned, if you're a true player of Flesh and Blood, don't be mad at the bans. Try to make the deck better in a way that you get to create this game for your type of playing.
Mhm.
Yep, it's just opening up a lot more design space because Art of War was really restrictive to try to print other powerful Majestics or even talent or class specific cards to try to share the same design space.
Mhm.
Because, like we said earlier, there was a lot of ways to cheat it. Levia historically has really liked Art of War. It's still in a lot of decks, but she's past the phase where I think she has to rely on it. It was a nice little scapegoat for just to go again and vanish for Blood Debt turn off, but that's another deck that's going to have to reconsider how they're building. So we're just going to see a lot more personalization in these metas, which I think is a great thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I would have to agree. And I mean, like, yeah, it sucks that these cards are going away for us, but we still get them in Living Legend. And they, at the end of this whole announcement, reiterated that, hey, Living Legend is a format. Like, we are supporting it. I think my interpretation is that we're going to continue to see it as an alternative to Blitz skirmishes. I mean, they straight up said that it was coming back again in Skirmish Season 10, which starts in what, November, I think?
Yeah,
So we'll
November.
we'll we'll get a chance to play around with these cards again. We're having a Living Legend calling in Chicago,
In
and
December
I
14th and 15th.
would imagine that that's not going to be the last one.
Probably
So
not.
we'll we'll definitely continue to see these cards, but I think they will be in the format that they belong in.
Mm, well put.
Cool. Anything else that you boys kind of want to touch on as far as like the announcement goes, or?
Not really.
And I think we've said it. Like they were transparent about the reasoning why, and it allows like the design space to flourish, and it's like it's overall good for the health of the game. Yeah, it sucks if you're someone who just bought a playset of Art of Wars because you wanted to play Zen, but like
Played in Living Legend, though.
yeah, play it in Living Legend. Like you have the cards at least. Like the cards aren't going anywhere. Like I think a lot of people are dooming and like, oh my god, now we can't play this deck. It's like no, we. I think Sean said it. Like
You
play
can
and create a deck that is fun for you.
Mhm.
now just make a deck that fits the way you play it.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
still absolutely going to be very powerful decks. We're just not going to see as many of like these powerful card draw effects on top of it.
Yeah.
Which again, I think is great. Like it kind
It
of
helps the
requires you
meta.
to put some more thought
Thought.
into like what you're putting into your list. I think overall it's going to be a like boon to deck building as far as like the people that really enjoy that aspect of the game and like trying to crack a certain deck.
Yeah. I mean, at a certain level, like that you mentioned that, it reminds me of like Michael Hamilton with Bolander. Like
Mhm.
it was a unique concept that worked because we were kind of in a lull of deck building and ideas in the game. And I think we've swung back to the other side of this, like, oh no, now everything is just like straight numbers, do the biggest, most broken thing, draw as many cards as possible. Is like I think we're gonna spring back into like looking at like those valued. I think of someone like Andrew Rothamel, who's an incredibly good player, and he's really good on KO. Like he is gonna flourish when people are trying to do all these other things. He's like, I know my bread and butter. I know how to play my deck, and it's gonna be effective, and I'm gonna be good at it. We're gonna see people
Yeah.
like Michael Hamilton like build a
Like
Verdance deck, or like maybe
truly
a
like
Cilio becomes like a burn aggro deck. Like there's so many possibilities with Rosetta coming out that we just don't know yet. And like
mhm.
and especially with how established heroes are gonna play within that meta as it evolves.
Yeah.
So I have a question for both of you now.
Mhm.
Because Zach brought up Rosetta. Out of the four heroes, which do you think you would be the most uncomfortable playing?
Ooh,
One of the Rune Blades.
probably a
Uh
Cilio.
Acilio? So now I
Yeah.
have a challenge for you guys. I am missing pre-release. I'm going to my cousin's wedding, so I'm gonna miss out. Sad but truthful. So I have a challenge for both of you when this time comes out. I want you to play the deck that you feel, if you can make it, the worst at. And then when I come
Ugh.
back, I want to challenge both of you on that deck.
Yeah, dude, I really don't know if I'm gonna be able to play Verdansk. I'm just not comfortable with like the wizard play style or like Earth. It's
You got a
oof.
whole week
Yeah.
to learn, bro.
I think
Yeah.
for
You got a
me, it's gonna
whole
be
weekend.
playing Florian or Aurora, one of the rune blades. Like I've tried to play Viserai and Chain in the past, and like for some reason it just didn't work with like how I wanted it to play. And was like it just wasn't something I enjoyed. But I think I would give those two heroes, especially in a pre-release, a chance and just like see what I can do. I'm going to a couple. So.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to play Florian in a pre-release. I think he's gonna be pretty
He
good
seems really
in
good.
like a limited environment.
I will want feedback.
Oh yeah, we'll get you some. We'll get you some.
Oh yeah.
Good, good. Gonna
But
just show up and kick Tyler's butt. That's all I want.
It's not that
I'm gonna
hard.
try. I'm hoping
Not
to
that
not
hard.
add another signature to the O2 mat.
Hey, I got mine dead in the middle. That's all that matters.
Ooh. Zach, you're gonna have to come back and add your signature to that mat someday.
I haven't ever achieved that, you know. So
You haven't
usually I'll
made
win
Bailey
round
go
one,
0-2?
then lose about 6 straight games. So.
Oh yeah, if you're winning round one, we're probably not playing then.
Yep, never.
Ooh, but
That why we play each other a lot, Bailey. We lose round one.
yeah, probably. But anyways, thanks for joining us, taking the time to listen to us. Again, great news, honestly, coming from this announcement. I think we're all very excited to see what comes of this, as far as like what it shakes up. But I think we're out of here. As always, you can listen to us on Spotify, Big Deck Energy. This will be going up on YouTube, also Big Deck Energy. Come pop into our Discord. I'll leave a link in the description. But we are out. Peace.
As always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you,
Deuces,
Shock.
see you, gang.
Ugh.